Hi, everyone, and welcome to Around the Campfire. I'm Jamie Sonley, Marketing Director at Northwoods, and your Around the Campfire host. I'm excited to have Caitlin Gerke, our UX Research Lead, and Matt Cargy, WordPress Practice Director and Business Development Manager, here with me today to talk about a very important topic that maybe doesn't get as much attention as it should, and that's how to sell the value of your digital projects to executives in order to gain buy-in and budget. So thank you both for joining me today. I think you are both now officially my most frequent guests on this podcast. So I need to give you some type of an award, right? So, or maybe just
Hmm.
making podcast history is good enough. So I don't know. But you guys keep me on my toes because you're on so much. I need to come up with new questions to ask you all the time at the beginning of our recording. So, what I have for you today is if you could move anywhere in the world, where would you move to? And
I'm
either
gonna
one of you
go.
can jump in. Yeah.
I'm gonna go because I kind of did this. I've always wanted to move to the East Coast for a long time now,
Mhm.
and I moved to Philadelphia last year. So I feel like
That's
I have a
cheating.
cop out answer.
That's cheating.
So I have a cop out answer because I love it over here. But I would say
Yeah.
if I had to leave Philly and go somewhere else, it would be London, England. If I
Mm,
got to ignore all of the logistics of moving to a different country, every time I'm in
yes,
London, I'm happy. I just love it. And I think that's why partially why I
I
love
do
the East Coast is
too.
it's like the mix of like history and modernism that's all in one place that you get in
Yeah.
both the East Coast and London.
I
So there
love
you
it.
go.
Okay, well, pick me up on your way to the airport should you decide to move to London. I'll go with you. That's definitely top of my list as well. Matt?
So living in Wisconsin, I hate cold. So it would definitely be south somewhere. I would say somewhere like way off the beaten trail, like out in the middle of nowhere. I would be
Like
single again because my
Montana or
wife, yeah,
something?
something like that. My wife would just be like, "Nope, I'm not coming with you." I've always
Oh.
loved just being in the middle of nowhere is like so maybe like New Zealand or something, because like the
Oh,
temperature is like
ooh,
between like 60 to 80 degrees or something, the north side of New
okay.
Zealand, and it's beautiful and stuff like that. So maybe that's where I'd move, but I'd have my own little hobbit hole or something like that. Where,
Nice.
yeah.
Awesome. That is not the answer I expected from you, Matt.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah, I
Uh,
don't know what I was expecting. I mean, maybe Bat Cave or something, but
yeah. Oh, I didn't think about that. Gotham City.
Gotham.
Gotham. Yeah, exactly. In my Bat Cave in Gotham.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, you guys. Let's go ahead and dive into our topic. So, we help our clients sell their digital projects to leadership and executives all the time. Caitlin and Matt, you are two of our team members who have critical insights to share here because you do this so often, probably more often than you want to admit. But because you do, you have really great insights and tips for other marketers who are faced with this challenge. So, Matt, I'll have you kind of kick things off. One question we do get a lot is how to get buy-in and budget from leadership for a full website redesign when leadership is convinced that just a partial redesign or maybe a couple changes here and there is really all that's needed. And that's what we have the budget for, and that's what we should do. So, what do you have for marketers, or advice do you have for marketers in that kind of a tricky situation where they know they really need to do a full redesign, but they just don't have complete buy-in from execs?
Yeah, this is actually a really good question because it is something that we do come across a lot. And it's one of the things I actually enjoy doing, part of the sales process, but then also once you get into the actual project and doing the project work, the thing that marketers do is they always forget who they are and what they actually do when it comes to selling their own projects. And the reason why I say that is because like when we're building a website and like when Caitlin and her team are going in to say like, all right, what's the purpose of your website? You know, like it's all about like put yourself in the shoes of the user and what's the type of information that they need that's going to convert them. But then when marketers have to do it for like a project like this, they never put themselves in the shoes of their leadership. And like, what does the leadership want? So it often becomes this like, well, think about what your leaders want and then try to change the message so that a redesign meets what they need out of a website, and then, work the details from there. And we tell marketers, hey, you should, maybe we should do some user interviews or, a survey or things like that. What's to stop a marketer from just talking to the leadership team, whoever the stakeholders are, and be like, hey, what would make you change your mind to actually want to do a full redesign? Or what is preventing you from doing that, and trying to understand that and then coming up with a solution. So I really feel like it's more of like, be a marketer, right? Do your, what you do for your product, do for yourself to get that project going through. And I mean, honestly, the leadership, they're always about results, right? And things like that. And so whatever you can do to truly create message around the results of what the project will do, like a full redesign project will do, that's just going to help you. And usually it's like, the bottom line, what are we going to get out of this is truly the solution. So that's my thoughts. It's like, figure out what they need or what they're looking for, and then create a plan around it so that you can actually get the project. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
And I feel like another thing, because I think that's totally spot on. And
Right.
I think the other thing I always think about when I think about like a partial redesign versus a full redesign is when you go back to what it is that they need, it's usually pretty easy to identify that a partial redesign isn't going to do it. I
That's a good
think
point.
it's,
Yes.
when people are like, oh, we need to, increase conversions, up our sales from our website, things like that. When you look at what you do with a partial redesign of like maybe changing some colors here and there, adding a page, like the really small tweaks, that's not going to actually make any of those types of
Yeah, it's not
goals
going to move the
better.
needle. Okay.
No, not
Yep.
at all. And I would say even more so when you look at the types of things that leadership is trying to accomplish on a website. 90% of the time when someone comes to us, it's you need a full redesign to make the type of impact that they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you go back to those goals that they have, that'll make it even easier to sell the full redesign, because it's such a obvious thing once you really start to look at it that, oh, if we change the color of that button and add some new photography, is that actually going to encourage more people to
Right. Yeah.
convert? Or do we need to really take a holistic look at this and see what we need to do? And usually it's let's take a bigger picture look.
Yeah. Oh, we just don't like
Yeah.
the color of the buttons anymore. Let's just change the
Yeah,
color. Oh yeah, that's going to convert tons
that'll do
more
it.
users. That's yeah.
They'll
Yeah.
push it over the
All great
edge.
points.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good points.
Yeah, and tying back to overall business goals and what those KPIs are for the organization is so critical. And Matt, to your point, just having conversation around what would push this forward, what are you looking for, so that marketers can actually, sell the project based on what that criteria is that the executives want to see. So it seems so simple, right?
It is. It is. I mean, it's so simple. People just overlook it, I think, is the
Yes.
easiest
Yeah.
way. They just overlook it.
Yes.
And
Right.
it's because you get nerves, or you really
Mhm.
want something, and you're just thinking about the end result. You're not thinking of all the steps to get there. So I think it's just more
Right.
of that.
Right. And I think another great point that you both make around this topic too is this concept of, the cost of doing nothing. And how do you advise marketers to talk about that when they're asking for budget? Or, what tips do you have that they can kind of share to say, hey, if we do nothing, this is going to be the impact. Or if we do just these partial changes, it's not enough, Caitlin, to your point, to get us where we need to be. So what is that cost of doing nothing as well?
Well, it definitely is. If you're talking from a technical standpoint of the cost of doing nothing, it can be a lot costlier when something disastrous happens to your website. So from the technical perspective, what I run into a lot on the WordPress side of things is when organizations don't do routine plugin updates or theme updates and things like that. Or they have a website that is completely custom coded. It's hard coded is the term we use. Hard coded, where somebody wrote all of this code in the theme, and it's not, you can't update it to work with newer versions of WordPress and things like that. So you get this really like difficult to use site. And that becomes something that can break really easily. And if your site's down and people can't get to it or they can't find you, that is one of the worst things that can possibly happen for you, because your website is that's who you are in the biggest sense possible. Because if somebody can't find you online, you don't exist. And if that website's down or broken, that sets a bad first impression for a user. So from a technical
Right.
perspective, just doing nothing is probably one of the worst things you can possibly do. So how do you apply that to, as a marketer, to describe like, hey, we need to do this? That's really where you should probably hire a consultant to come in, take a peek under the hood, and point out a number of different things that need to be done to at least get you to a point where you're not going to have some catastrophic event that's going to cause a lot of problems. From the strategy perspective, that's where Caitlin comes in, and I'm sure she's got tons of thoughts with that.
I definitely do. I think
Uh,
the easiest one to explain, because I think there's always downsides to doing nothing, but like SEO is the clearest, like night and
yes.
day doing nothing example of, if you don't spend any time optimizing for search engines or adapting to Google's algorithm as it changes and things like that with that content on your site, or updating content on your site regularly, Google's going to leave you behind. And everybody, all your competitors and the other companies out there who are spending that time on that, they're the ones who are going to get those rankings. So it doesn't even really matter how your site looks or what it's doing if no one's going to it. So that's a very easy one-to-one, it's going to leave you behind, let alone if you leave your site design and, you let the site age and age and age so the design looks really out of date or things like that. I mean, that's also it's like Matt said, that's who you are online. That's your entire perception. I was doing user interviews at one point for a company that had an older website. And I was talking to one of their now customers about the first time they went to this company's website. And they said that they originally thought that they were out of business because of the way that their website looked,
Oh,
because it was
wow.
so old and there was out of date literature on there and out of date events on there.
Mm.
And I told this to the company we were working for, and they were shocked that their website could give that strong of an impression.
Yes.
And this person being a customer, they said that they really just needed to find someone in that moment. So they reached out hoping someone would respond, but they didn't expect them to. So it's a big sign
Wow.
of how if you do nothing and you just let your site age and let it sit, just the way it looks can make a pretty big impact on what happens to you online. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I think marketers get caught up in the look and feel of their sites,
Hmm.
but there's so much more to the site. I mean, you
Yeah.
could still have a relatively, like, quote unquote old looking website, but it still could be very user friendly.
Oh,
You could
yeah.
still do great conversions and things like that. So the key is just understanding, like, from Caitlin's perspective of, just if you're noticing your numbers are going down on analytics, just that same number of people aren't coming anymore. You haven't written content. You've got things that aren't working anymore from a technical perspective. Those are all of the big red flags that need to pop up, that you need to put together in some sort of document or report that you can present the leadership to really explain to them, if we don't do anything, the result is going to be this. It's going to be worse,
Hmm.
or something along those lines. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good advice. That's a good segue into my next question for you, Caitlin. And just by nature of being in UX research, you're constantly immersed in all of this data. So you're seeing it regularly and you're using it to make critical decisions about, client websites and digital properties all the time. But what do you see that marketers can do better to better leverage the data that they have to their advantage when it comes to selling the need for those digital projects? Do you have any advice on things they could be doing to really showcase that data in a way that's going to resonate with execs?
Yeah, for sure. I think, starting with Matt's original comment of go back to what they want
Yeah.
to know or what they want about from the website, and kind of start with that. Start with what are the things that leadership wants to see from the site, and then go to the data that can show them those things. So, if it's traffic to certain web pages, make sure you've got Google Analytics running and make sure that you can see how that traffic has changed. If it's a certain conversion, if it's filling out a form, maybe you need to go set Google Tag Manager up to get tracking on that particular form to see how that changes. You can do heat maps to see if people are clicking on a button that they want people to be finding. Going back to what does that leadership team actually care about? And then let's make sure we've got the data that lets us know if that's happening or not. And then I always think of data as sort of this great storyteller because you can watch the data to see the story of what's happened and what's happening going forward. So, it's a really great way to say, okay, you want to see conversions on the site, you care about this form being filled out. Well, let's watch as from 2 years ago, we can see that data go down. We can see those form submissions go down. Well, to me, that's a sign, okay, well, what's going on that page? Has other stuff been changed? Has Google changed their algorithm? They're not showing that page as much. There's a ton of different things that could cause that to happen, but you've got that data as that sort of storytelling. This is what's happening. Let's find a way to fix it. And if you don't have that data set up to track that, you don't even know if anything is going on. And you also don't have a way to prove to leadership that things are working or not working. It's all sort of hearsay, and whenever it gets to hearsay, you get all the politics involved, you get so many other voices get in the mix, when it's just so valuable when you can come back to the data and say, no, this is what is happening. I have proof. I can see the numbers right here. And it tends to be really influential in the influencing of leadership to not only allow you to do the things you want to do, but also to make sure that they're fully understanding what's happening in a way that they can relate to. Because I feel like most leadership teams, when they see that data, that tends to be very influential to them because that's something that they're used to seeing and working with on a regular basis. So
Right, yeah.
make sure you're tracking everything that's important and make sure that you've got that set up, because I think that can be incredibly influential, not just now in trying to get your redesign across the finish line, but also in the future in showing your success and getting budget for the things you care about in the future.
Yes, a great point. Yeah, gut feelings don't often secure budget. So yes, that's a very good point.
I was thinking along the same lines of the gut instinct on things, and everything that Caitlin was just saying, I 100% agree with. That even translates into designs and stuff like that too. And sometimes as a marketer, you might be really specialized in one thing or another. I'm not trying to plug Northwoods or anything, but it's nice to be able to have experts come in who can pinpoint certain things to help tell that story, like Caitlin was talking about. So from a design perspective, it's, everyone, when we ask them, what do you want in a new website? It's like, oh, we want it to be clean. We want a lot of white space. And they're very generic ideas, and that doesn't sell a project to leadership. It's got to be, you know what, we want to create a sales funnel on our landing pages, and we want to do X, Y, Z with the design to make sure we lead that user to convert. And it's little things like that that can go a long way. With the analytics information that Caitlin was talking about, I think you combine all of that, then you have this powerful story that you can sell to your leadership team or who's ever in, the CFO, whatever it is, you sell that story. I think that's a perfect way of describing it, Caitlin, where it's like, this is the story of how we get to where we need to be to get our business growing or becoming the best in our industry or whatever it is. So that's all really good ideas.
Matt, you just reminded me of an example that I think is perfect of this.
Sure.
So it's a site we were working with where they had a slider on their homepage. So it was like a news slider where it would go through different news articles. And in our strategy, we recommended they actually get rid of that slider. So we're like, people aren't really looking at this. Most of the time, people have banner blindness where they don't even really see those sliders. Let's get rid of it and let's use that in a more way that actually helps you to highlight the things that are new. And let's restructure this page from a design perspective. Well, the leadership team, the core team we were working with, fully on board. When it went to leadership, the leadership team's like, no, everybody loves the slider. We want the slider. Everybody uses it. We love it. So we went back to that data. The data is the storyteller. And we showed, how many clicks to the most recent articles that were in there came from the homepage, came from the slider. None. We then looked at heat maps, and we were able to see, with heat maps, we could see where people are clicking on a certain page. So we saw how many people on average click to advance the slider or click on the call to action on the slider. None. And we could just go down the line and show these different pieces of data that showed nobody is looking at this slider, nobody's engaging with it. Let's use that such valuable homepage space right at the top of the homepage. Let's use that in a way that's more interactive and better at telling your story. And let's do that announcements in a slightly different way. And here's what we recommend, and here's why, and here's some more data that shows why that's a good idea. And having those data convince this leadership team to say, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't know people weren't actually using it. I just thought it was nice. Let's go and do this other way of doing things. Yeah. So without that data, we would never, there's no way we would have gotten that slider removed. But it ended up being the right choice for the client because we could see the data that showed that nobody really cared about this. So making sure you've got that data to really get the full picture of what's going on, it can just be so influential on a design side too. And that's, your comment just completely reminded me that happened. So
yeah, that's such a good point too. And it also brings up the need for having data to take yourself as executives and marketers out of the equation because you are not your target audience, and making sure that you're focused on that target audience, and that data really helps you do that. So that's an excellent point. I'm going to jump to another question for you, Caitlin, because I think this sort of ties to a little bit of what we were just talking about, but oftentimes it ties back to the conversation around design and things too, because we get very hung up on the sexy things like the design and the color palette and the imagery and all of that. And that's all fabulous. And we can't wait for this new site to launch with all of this great new design. And we forget that maybe we need to budget for content migration. Maybe we need to budget for SEO and redirects, maybe training, ongoing support. Like we don't think past launch. It's like planning for a wedding and forgetting that you're actually getting married and what that entails. It's just the main event of that day. What are some crucial things that you see, and Matt, you too, where you see marketers forget to budget for these things as a part of an overall package for a website redesign, and then they have to crawl back to leadership maybe later and ask for more budget where they should have maybe gotten all of that upfront?
Yeah. I'll give the two kind of UX-y things, and I'm sure Matt has some more technical stuff too. But you hit the nail on the head with content migration, anything related to content at all. Anything at all, writing it, migrating it, optimizing it. Content is just always forgotten. And especially when it comes down to, we spend all this time doing a strategy and, we make all these recommendations of let's combine these pages, let's move this over here, let's write something new. And it sounds great. And we're all in agreement that that's the right path forward. But then once we get to the point of, all right, let's do that. We got to write all this new content. We got to combine all this stuff. Let's go optimize this page for SEO to make sure it ranks better. And that time commitment just gets completely forgotten because it's so much work. We always, I feel like internally at Northwoods, have said that content is the hidden time sink and cost sink of a website because it seems so simple, but it just is not. It just takes so much time and so much effort. And so I definitely think about content early. Think about also what skills you have on your team to be able to accomplish some of this work on your own. If there's content you can write, maybe you just need a little bit of assistance from someone else, from a third party. Maybe you can do it all in-house. You just need to figure out who can handle what and figure out that logistics. Just start thinking about that early because it's going to take a lot of time and more time than you think it will. The other thing is anything sort of ongoing, I think, is sometimes forgotten because we work so hard to get to the launch, and then it's launched, and then what?
So done. I'm done.
Yeah, we
good.
did it. And then that's it, right? We're just good. Right, well, no, we just talked about what happens if you leave a website sit forever and it's not good. So thinking about, what do I need to do to make sure that my user experience is up to date? How do I stay on top of Google? What are our goals from a marketing perspective with the website? And how do we need to track that and work on that from an ongoing perspective? Keeping in mind all of that, I think, is really important. And then in addition to cost with all of these things, I would say the other kind of hidden cost sink is time, the time cost of this. Yes. So not forgetting that in addition to just that some of these things might take funds to finance, especially if you're hiring a third party to help you, that if it doesn't take funds, even if it does take funds, it's going to take time. And keeping in mind what that time commitment's going to be in order to do what you want to be able to do with your site, I think is also really important and often forgotten. So
Yeah,
Yeah, good point.
that's essentially the hidden cost for the marketer is their time. They've got so many other things to worry about on their daily, business job tasks that they have to do that they don't ever really consider the amount of time required for any type of website project. And when Caitlin and I used to, we'd do evaluations of websites, we'd be like a 10-minute eval thing. One of the lines we always like to say is like, if you're thinking about writing content, estimate what you're going to write and then like triple it because that's what the actual time is going to take to do because it takes so long. And I don't care. You can use AI to come up with all of this content and stuff, but you still have to go through the whole process of making it in your voice and making sure you're putting keywords and things like that. So that's definitely an important thing to factor and a cost that just marketers don't consider time. The other thing, which is kind of content related, is when you have any type of data associated with your website. So that could be blogs, newsletters. It could be like a huge product catalog that you have on your site. There's a lot of hidden costs around that, essentially related to, well, can we just lift it and shift it to the new site, or do we have to really clean up all of that information before we move it over? And that's especially true when it comes to like product catalogs. From the technical standpoint, if we're building a new site, we have to factor in all of the specifications and all the different pieces that a product might need, but do you have that information on hand internally at your business? And so that is something you have to think about, where maybe it's just not the marketing team that has to spend a bunch of time. Might be your product team or your engineers or whoever's in charge of that data. That can be also a hidden piece of the project that people don't think about. I think a lot of people consider like hosting and the cost of the platform and stuff. It's more of these like intangible things of like time that they don't really consider that have a dramatic effect to the overall success of the project.
Yeah, really great points. Okay, so I'm going to throw this one at you guys. If a marketer takes all of your fantastic advice and they go to leadership and really hoping they're going to get this full redesign budget approved, and they still can't get their executives on board despite using data and storytelling and really showcasing how this is going to impact the business. What's the best next step for a marketer to take in those situations? And do you sometimes or usually recommend getting agencies involved in helping them sell projects if they haven't been up to that point?
My first thought is just go find a new job. I mean, that's if you can't, I'm kidding. Sometimes there's a quote, and I'm trying to like, you can't be a prophet in your own hometown, right? It's a client
Yes.
told this to me recently, and that's really stuck true because sometimes you could just like preach and preach and preach, and no one listens. And so, from my perspective, and Caitlin might have a completely different view on this, but it's like if they're not willing to jump, then it's like, well, how can we start making changes in small measures, just little phases here and there that eventually add up to a full-blown redesign, but just make it an incremental type of project where we're tackling a few things, and some of those things, because you've tackled it, you've got more data, maybe that'll catch the eye of the leadership team and maybe they'll be more interested in talking about a bigger project. Those are my thoughts.
I was going to say something very similar, which is
Oh,
that, yeah,
hey.
you can kind of usually break it up in
Yeah.
ways that maybe are a little bit more digestible. The other thing I would recommend is using that data to, especially if it's only one person going to leadership, get some other teams on board and maybe show how it could impact not just marketing, but it'll make sales lives easier because you'll have XYZ on that. And it'll make this other team's lives easier because you'll get XYZ on that. So if,
Yeah.
you don't want to do the incremental thing, maybe use that data to show how you can get everyone on
Yes.
board. So it's not just marketing saying, hey, we need a new website. It's sales and operations and marketing, and everyone's coming to the leadership saying we need a new website. Well, that's a little bit more compelling. And then, to what Jamie said, yeah, bringing a third party also can be helpful. We've consulted with people all the time on, why it's helpful to redesign a website from our strategic from our expectations or our thought process, and we can help show some of that data. I think the big thing is having someone who's able to go in and pull that data that says this is what we're seeing and this is how you would benefit. So it's not just that hearsay. I think, there might be other bits of data out there that you aren't thinking of that we could help pull, but also kind of coming at it from that almost like a mob perspective of we all need a site. Come pay attention to us all.
We're gonna
usually it can get
riot
other
if we
people on
don't
board.
get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like
That
the
can be
mob
helpful sometimes.
analogy. That's a new one, Caitlin.
Got our pitchforks.
Pitchforks and
Exactly.
torches.
You
We need a
will do this.
website.
Yeah.
New
Oh,
sales
that's too
tactic.
funny.
We bring the
Yeah.
pitchforks and torches to your
You
leadership
just have to
meetings.
light them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it.
Oh my goodness, I do too. All right, you guys, is there anything else we haven't touched on yet that you'd like to add that can help marketers secure budgets and buy-in from execs?
Start early. Sometimes it takes a while, and sometimes it takes a while of showing the value and talking about it. Like, it just sometimes takes a while. So maybe don't wait until the last minute of when budgets are due, think
Yeah.
ahead. And also start that data collection early to make sure you're tracking the right things, because, if you only start tracking things right before you want to try and convince your your leadership team, then you don't have that full picture and it's harder to show the impact. So, start early and start thinking about it early as much as you can would be my main recommendation.
Yeah, that's great advice.
We've been talking a lot about like data and really tangible things that you can show to leadership. And oftentimes when I am talking to leadership, what I'll find is that, the marketing team really focused on just the bells and whistles of a new platform. Or they're like, oh, if we get this, it's going to completely change everything because now when you push a button, little sparkles come out of the screen or something, whatever. And it's like, that stuff doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. What really means everything is what is the return on this investment of not only money, but my internal team's time. How many hours does my marketing team need to do this? Oh, you need engineering too, and IT, and like we have to dedicate all of these resources to get this new thing up. Is it really worth that cost? Or are we just doing this because we want a fancy little new tool? And so you really got to think of it in that respect, just from the very start of what I was talking about, is like putting yourself in the leadership shoes. That's what they're looking for, is just how am I going to look like a rock star by spending all this money? Is it going to be something worthwhile? I hope. So those are my thoughts.
Right, exactly. And hope is not a strategy, right?
No. Yes, that's exactly.
Well, thank you both for joining me again as my most frequent and for sharing all your great insights to help marketers get the much needed budgets and buy-in that they need for their digital initiatives. So thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for tuning in.
Do we get a smoking jacket or anything for being the most?
Yeah, like the 5 timers club on SNL.
Yeah, like it's
like
yeah. We should get
that.
something.
I'm thinking
Do they
Rose.
call those a smoking jacket?
I don't know.
Really?
It's just.
I'll come up with something creative. I'll come up with something
I totally
creative.
derailed this.
It should be themed flannel, since that's what seems to be
Yeah,
wearing.
Totally.
You guys got the memo. Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this episode. If you joined us for the first time or you want to catch up on prior Around the Campfire episodes, visit our podcast playlist on YouTube or visit our website at nwsdigital.com/around the campfire. Thanks again for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you around the campfire with us again very soon. Take care.